we're all born with one main responsibility, and it trumps everything else in your life, and that's the responsibility to take care of yourself. You are responsible for yourself. You're responsible for the way you feel. You're the responsible emotionally. You have to own that. And if you don't like the way you feel, you have to fix it. Otherwise, you can do what I did and self-medicate and find yourself in a horrible hole of addiction.
It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Ken Rideout today, who is our guest. Ken is a dad. He's a husband, he's an endurance athlete, and he is co-host of the Fight podcast with Teddy Atlas. And all of that, on top of it, he has a full-time job working in finance. We are pleased to have Ken on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
But cool, so it would be great to hear you kind of like take us through your youth and how you got to, I'd say, college. We'll start there, because I know in college you were an athlete.
Yes.
And that'll kind of like kick off some of the other things we'll talk about today.
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Boston, in Somerville, kind of in an inner city setting. A very chaotic childhood. When I graduated from high school, not to skip ahead, but just to give context, when I graduated from high school, I worked as a guard at the Billerica House of Correction, and my stepfather had previously been an inmate there, and my brother would eventually become an inmate there. And I tell that just to give context to like the way I was growing up. It was complete chaos. Not a lot of nurturing, so to speak, a lot of physical abuse, and not a lot of kindness in general. And, I lived with my mom and my stepfather and one full brother and one half brother, and it was just constant turmoil. But from my youngest or earliest memory, I just remember thinking, I'm not supposed to be here, and like, I don't want this kind of life for myself. I had fantasized about, I guess, the life that I wanted, which was like, for the old people out there, like the Cleavers. Like, I just wanted a traditional family and a loving home where people cared about each other and genuinely loved each other. That's not to say you can't have conflict with each other, but you don't settle conflict by screaming, cursing, and like potentially physically hurting each other. Even with disciplining my own children now, I'm like, when they're a little younger, they'd get an occasional spanking here and there, but the truth is, it makes no sense to hit someone and hurt them into submission, into compliance. And like I say, if they've gotten 2 whacks on the ass or 3, I'm like then racked with guilt and then have to go explain to them that it's my fault that they got a spanking. I shouldn't have done that. And but my childhood years kind of set the stage for the way I'm living my life now. But getting back to my childhood, I was a very active hockey player. I was heavily involved in competitive hockey, traveling teams. I played hockey growing up with a number of kids that went on to play in the NHL, like Sean McGeckran, the Sacco brothers, Keith Kachuk, who's now his 2 sons are dominating the NHL, which is so crazy to see because I still think I'm like a young guy. But hockey was my main goal and obsession throughout childhood, and we were all those kids I mentioned, we were all along the same lines in terms of ability, but at some point in high school, those guys that were destined for the next level, they just separated. And I tell parents this all the time. If your kids are meant to be pro athletes, they will let you know. There's nothing you can do to affect that. Because I trained as much, as intensely as all of those kids. And at some point, they just clearly were better. They were also awesome at baseball. They could dunk a basketball. It's like, it's so hard to explain this to parents who might not have played high-level sports, and they think that their kid's going to be the next big superstar. LeBron James didn't have all this silver spoon shit. He didn't go to basketball camps. He didn't have all those accoutrements that kids are provided with these days. He let you know, I'm the best. So anyway, that was hard through high school and college, and it's not really like... So I went to Somerville High School and played football and hockey in high school. I played baseball a couple years, and then my final season I ran track just as an aside, people are going to think, oh, I knew he had a running background. I mean, I ran track for like a season. I'd show up, run the track meet, a mile, 440 hurdles, whatever they needed help with. I wasn't very good. I was just there. And then I went on to play hockey and football at Framingham State, two Division III NCAA sports. And I always tell people, like, I was average at best. I was good enough to be on the team, but no one was, like, looking for me. You know, like, no one was like, thank God we got Ken here. But I think that I probably could have got a lot more out of myself if I had been a little bit more focused. But that period of my life was so. Prior to going to college, I was a pretty happy, like, I had a nice, pleasant disposition. I got along with the teachers. I was just comfortable. I knew I had to get out of the situation I was in, but I was confident I would. When I got to college and realized how much I didn't know about being an adult and what I was going to do with my future, like I majored in sociology because the kids I was playing hockey with were like, yo, sociology is the easiest. So I got a degree in sociology, which tells you like where my head was at the time. And again, I had no guide. No one was, and this isn't an excuse. I mean, it is what it is. I just didn't have anyone telling me like, here's what you should be thinking about. Get good grades so you can get a master's degree. I was like, I just got to get out of here. Any grades will be fine. And
That's fair.
yeah, it sucked. And that's where I started to like, maybe my freshman or sophomore year in college, I started experimenting with drugs, mainly cocaine, and thus started like probably a 5-year odyssey of like coke and booze with my buddies from Boston and friends from college. And this was like, it's funny because when I look at kids now and people I see now, like young people I see now, like the people I grew up with was so incredibly aggressive. Like it would be very uncommon if someone didn't get into a fight at night, which is crazy. Now I
That's
can't
so
even.
stressful.
So stressful. I can't even tell you the last time I saw a fight. But yeah, it was. It's just crazy how quickly you become immune to your situation and think that it's the norm because everyone else is doing that. And anyway, then I eventually moved to New York City and started working in finance, and eventually the cocaine abuse dissipated because it was just like, I always tell people, cocaine is like the big lie. It sounds like such an awesome idea, and it is an awesome idea until about 30 minutes after you start, and then you're like, oh my god, this is only going to get worse from here, and it eventually is going to culminate in me like not being able to sleep, being miserable, contemplating suicide, asking why I wasted another day of my life. But I did that every weekend for a couple of years until I finally had enough and stopped that. But unfortunately, at that point, I was living in New York, and what I have come to realize since is that very few people are taking drugs to just get high. Normally, people that have drug problems are using drugs to escape the way they normally feel. Getting high is nice, but I mean, I would eventually be introduced to Percocet after an ankle surgery, and very quickly was hooked on prescription pain medicine, opioids like Percocet, Lortab, and eventually fentanyl and anything I could get my hands on. And what I realized is that all I was trying to do was dull the pain that I had been feeling from childhood and early adulthood that I just had never dealt with in a therapeutic setting. The turmoil and the discomfort I had with myself, my station in life, and the shitty thing about doing things the way I did them is not only do you still have to deal with the emotional trauma that you were masking to begin with, but now you're also physically addicted to opioids. And for anyone who knows that space, I can tell you that it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do by far. I mean, it's like having the worst flu or illness you've ever had for like 10 to 14 days and knowing you can stop it at any point by just getting high again and for years, I mean, I spent 10 years on this like merry-go-round of telling myself I'm going to stop next week. I'm just going to stay on it for another month or two. Then I'll get sober while I'm on vacation. Then I'd get to vacation. I'd be like, fuck it. I'm not going to waste my whole vacation withdrawing from opioids. I'll do it when I go back to work. And it was just, eventually I went to an outpatient detox. Got sober with the help of prescription medication to kind of deal with the withdrawal symptoms, so like blood pressure medication, Xanax to sleep, Ritalin to stay awake. And About 5 or 6 days into my detox, I had to get to either 7 or 10 days, and then they gave me a shot of Vivitrol, which is a long-lasting, extended release opioid blocker. Intramuscular injection keeps you sober for a month. You cannot get high. I tried. If you take if you take any kind of pain medicine or shoot heroin, whatever people do, I never shot drugs, but it would block the receptors in your brain. You can't get high, and so I knew there was light at the end of the tunnel, and about 2/3 of the way through this, I woke up one night, and again, I'm on blood pressure meds, Xanax, all these different medications to kind of ease the discomfort. And I blacked out in the middle of the night in the bathroom. I got up to go to the bathroom, collapsed, and my wife found me, and then my whole like world came crashing down. She didn't know that I was dealing with this, which begs the question: how's your wife not know you're on drugs? But she only knew me on drugs, so to her, I was just a fucking weird guy. And when she found me like that in a moment of weakness, I just came clean with everything. Well, maybe it was a moment of strength, but I told her everything, and it was devastating. And but we got through it. I got the Vivitrol shot, and the rest is history. I was sober, and then started using endurance sports as a way to cope with the emotional turmoil that I was going through in the first place to deal with the addiction. So I got into therapy and started exercising, and literally no particular goal with the exercise. I was just doing endurance sports. So I was running, cycling. I taught myself how to swim, more or less. I mean, I knew how to swim if I jumped in a pool with my buddies, but I never swam laps, so I just so I just went to the New York Athletic Club, jumped into the pool, and started swimming next to like former Olympians, college superstars, and I just started asking people for pointers, like, "Hey, buddy, watch me swim down and back and tell me what I'm doing wrong." And eventually, I taught myself how to swim, and I just out-trained a lot of people. I did the Ironman in Hawaii 3 times. My wife and I, when we had our fourth child, we moved to LA, and it just became obvious that Ironman training with a family with 4 young children wasn't conducive, because it was like, no bullshit. On a Saturday and Sunday, I'd train for like 5 to 8 hours. I'd go for a 100-mile bike ride, run 10 miles off the bike. It was stupid in hindsight. It was the most selfish thing ever, but all part of my journey. So I eventually focused all my energy on running. Again, no particular goals. I was just running a lot. And like anything, if you are into painting, canvas painting, and you paint a lot, you're going to get good. And that's what happened. I started to get faster and faster. I started to win some small races, then some bigger races. And then I eventually won a full marathon the day before I turned 50. I won the Myrtle Beach Marathon in 2:30 flat. I would go on to run a 2:28 marathon at Sacramento. I think I've run under 2:30. Over the age of 50, I've run 2:30, I think under 2:30 4 times. I won the age group world championship at the Chicago Marathon last October. I ran 2:29:10. And a year or two ago, I ran my fastest half marathon when I was 50 years old. I ran 1:10, so 5:22 per mile for 13 miles. And here I am now analyzing my blood work and getting depressed because I have genetically high cholesterol that we're going to talk about.
Well, so actually, just going back a little bit, you made a comment that's super interesting, which is you always knew you were going to get out.
Always knew.
So what was that? Is that, what was that? Always knowing you would get out? Because probably not everybody feels that way.
Yeah, I wish that I had a real snazzy answer or something that sounded perfectly packaged, but the truth is, I was so miserable as a child living in those conditions. We didn't necessarily live in squalor. It wasn't a mess like some of the kids that I grew up with, but there was not a lot of emotional stability.
Yeah.
And I couldn't live like that. I had anxiety from the jump. Obviously, when you're a kid, you don't know you have anxiety. I'm just like, this sucks. Everything stressed me out. Like, is the door locked? Is someone going to break in? Not that we had anything to steal. And it's like running. I just decided I was going to run. And then once I started running, I was like, I'm going to win a marathon. And it's like, in my mind, I'm like, of course I won a marathon. I decided that it was important to me. And once I committed to it, I don't know, maybe it's like a superpower. When I decide I want to do something, I'm like a dog on a bone. The thought of being mediocre at anything in life sucks to me. maybe that prevents me from trying some of the things I might want to try, but I've tried a lot of things, and the thought of being average pisses me off because most of my life was spent being average. I was an average hockey player, an average football player. And once I got off the drugs, I'm like, fuck this average stuff. I'm not doing this anymore. Everything I do, I'm doing with intention. Like I just last week came back from Oregon. I was out training with Cameron Haynes, the bow hunter, and I shot a bow and arrow for the first time, and it was unbelievable. I was convinced I was gonna suck because I didn't do any of that stuff when I was a kid. We didn't do any outdoorsy stuff. I never went fishing, never went hunting. But I actually did pretty well. And I was sure I was going to embarrass myself. But, at the end, I shot like 8 of the arrows. Boom, bullseyes. I was like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm doing this. That seems like something other people do. And my middle son is obsessed with outdoor stuff. So, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm doing another project with Mike Sorelli, who hosts the Everyday Warrior podcast for Men's Journal. And basically, he called me the other day and was like, hey, do you want to potentially set a world skydiving record? And I'm like, dude, you know that I've never skydived. I've never even done a tandem skydive. He's like, yeah, don't worry, we're gonna train you, and then we're gonna do a 5-man jump from 42,000 feet. I'm like, brother, 42,000 feet, you can't even breathe at 42,000, and it's cold. He's like, yeah, we got everything taken care of. You're gonna be on oxygen. So I'm telling my wife this. She goes, what if you do one jump and you hate it? I'm like, fuck, it's gonna be a painful 6 months then, because I gotta do 50 to 100 jumps, and then in November we're gonna try to set this world record of 5 people jumping in tandem from 42,000 feet.
All right, that's wild. So you're in it to win it for this, huh?
Hell yeah.
That so kind funny. Of stuff. I was going to ask you. I was like, so what's next after all of these marathons? And I think now we know. It's skydiving at 42,000 feet.
Well, last year I did my first ultramarathon in Mongolia across the Gobi Desert called the Gobi March, and I was like a 155-mile race over 6 days, a stage race, so 21 to 50 miles a day, every day predetermined. Carrying everything is self-supported with the exception of water. So you had to carry all the food you need, all the clothes, anything you needed you had to have. So, you're running with a heavy-ass backpack, and it's heavy. And I won. First time I've ever run with a backpack. First time I ever went camping. And I won by 90 minutes. And it was some experience, super strong athletes there. And first couple of days I thought they were going to kill me, that I was going to die trying. And then eventually I just wore them down and just kept showing up, like a boxer who won't go away. You can hit me as many times as you want. When you're done, I'm going to do the hitting. And that's what I did. And so I think this year I'm going to do another one. I might do one in Africa in August. I'm just trying to work out the logistics now.
Is that Moroccan one? Or you do,
no, Marathon des Sables? No, Marathon des Sables. Nah, I'm done with the fucking desert stuff. I don't mind the heat, but running in the sand. And at Marathon des Sables, it's spelled DESSABLES for people listening. Marathon des Sables is the French pronunciation. But in that race, the race I did in Mongolia, they would provide you with water and boiling water. So they had kettles and they'd cook over fires. In Marathon des Sables, you have to carry your own little gas butane stove. So you have to heat your own water. And I'm just dude, that's one more thing. And we slept in tents. At Marathon des Sables, they just put up a shelter. So there's no sides on it. So when you put your sleeping bag down and your sleeping mat, if you have one, you're basically sleeping on the desert floor. And I can tell you, man, the couple days that we camped in a sand dune was a nightmare. Sand just gets everywhere. No shower for a week. Oh, it was... So Marathon des Sables just seems way too much of an inconvenience for me. And also, the Moroccans, from what I hear, there's a bunch of ways you can cheat the system. If I'm racing, I have 3 buddies there, let's say, we all agree, you can win this. These other kind of teammates, which isn't technically allowed, can be carrying a lot of stuff for you. You can get spot checked, and they make sure you have your requisite gear, and if you don't, you get penalized. But there's a lot of ways around that, and I've heard through the grapevine that at the Moroccans, there's a few of them that do that kind of shit where they're muling for other people, which would... that would end very badly for everyone if I caught someone cheating as I'm suffering like a dog and they're help. But I digress. But I do like the adventure side of that because it's so uncomfortable for me. There's nothing that I look forward to about the event other than winning. So when I'm there, I'm just like, let's get this over with. I don't even want to take a break. Let's just go continuously to get it, cut it, make it as quick as possible.
So what was like the grossest moment of this one in Mongolia? What was the worst?
I hated not taking a shower. I hated having to use like for toilets. They just set up these black kind of tarps, and it's just they just dig a hole in the ground, and then they throw some sawdust in there occasionally. But it's just disgusting. Like I'm a big baby. I don't want to be inconvenient. I want to stay at the Four Seasons, have like nice sheets. So the whole outdoors part of it was hard for me. Of course, by the end, I was like scavenging for food. I would have eaten food out of the trash. At that point, I was like trying to be as light as possible. You had to have a minimum of 2,000 calories a day in your bag. So I probably had 2,500. But by the last couple of days, I'm like down to maybe 1,000 a day. So I'm burning 10 to 12,000,
Yeah.
analyzing that in real time using a fitness tracker. And then I lost like 12 pounds, so that part was hard. But I felt like, man, I look really lean.
Wow, that's awesome. So what actually made you want to do a trail race over the road races? Because you've done a bunch of road races and then Ironman and...
A friend of mine called Scott Daru, who was the president of Equinox, he was telling me that he was doing this race, and I don't know why. He was telling me, and I said, dude, I bet you I can win that race. And he was like, are you crazy? You've never done anything like this. What makes you think that? And I was just like, he was like, I don't think you can win that race. And I was like, I'm going to call them right now and see if I can do it. I don't know why. So I asked my wife, like, yo, am I crazy to think about doing this race in Mongolia? I like the adventure part of it. Mongolia sounds cool. And she was like, well, you're always talking about, doing things outside of your comfort zone. So why don't you put your money where your mouth is and stop talking shit and do it? And I was like, oh,
okay,
it's on.
Win this.
Yeah. So I just signed up like less than 2 months ago. I want to say it was like maybe 4 weeks. So I bought a bunch of backpacks to find one that worked because they would just rub you raw everywhere. There's so many nuances about the event that you just can't anticipate, and one of them is like you're running as fast as you can with a 20-pound backpack. It's like rubbing on your neck, rubbing on your waist. I was a mess. I was always like had bleeding sores all over my neck and my back, and my wife was like, dude, what is going on? You look like you've been like tortured. I'm like, I
need my back calluses. I gotta do it.
So I eventually figured out what backpack worked for me, which was great. And then, on the second day I fell down and the strap ripped right off the backpack, like irreparable. And a woman who dropped out after the third stage was nice enough to give me her pack. And mine was good. It just had one strap. But technically you can do stuff like that. I mean... Under the circumstances, they were like, yeah, it's cool. But, I mean, you can't really, like, be switching off gear and stuff with people. It's supposed to be self-supported. But I made it work, and it was an experience. But I feel like now, knowing what I know now, going into it, I feel like I could be much, much better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wild ride. I, like, almost want to ask you, what is an event that you would try... where you don't think you would win, but like, you want to see if you could? Or does that not exist in your world? Like, is that like not something that...
Well, I mean, I didn't win an Ironman. That was like super competitive. I mean, I won in my eyes by qualifying and going to Hawaii 3 times. A lot of people want to go there. A lot of people pay a lot of money to go there if they can't qualify, but I was able to qualify 3 separate times. I can't think of anything that I would consider doing and not trying to win, or at least winning by some measure. Like, I never think of things to do for fun. Like, oh, I'm just going to go, run the Appalachian Trail. If I were going to do something like that, I'd be like, what's the record? So I don't know. I just need that like little bit of competitiveness, not to like, none of this shit is for others. Like I was telling someone the other day, it would be impossible for me to do what I do if it was for other people or for the gratification of others or for like the accolades of others, because it's too much.
Yeah.
No one could get up. I mean, this morning when I ran before I came here in Nashville, It was torrential rain, like lightning, thunder, like the kind of rain where cars would stop under the overpass on the highway because you're like, well, it's too dangerous to drive.
Yeah.
But I got caught in it, and I'm like, damn it, I've got this flight. There's nothing I can do. I've just got to power through this. And my only fear was like, please don't let me get hit by lightning. As lightning was striking all around. I was running the gauntlet, but yeah. So in that regard, like my trying to win is not for. It's not for attention. Like I have all the attention I could ever have imagined, and then some. I do this stuff for me, and I think that's why it's resonated with people. Is that I think that I'm authentic. Like I'm just the real person. I don't think I'm special. As a matter of fact, I think I'm subpar, but I know what I know, and that's you'll have to kill me to beat me. And that mentality can get you a long way, because most people are fairly soft. They don't want to be uncomfortable. And once you realize that there's a direct correlation between being willing to suffer and willing to be uncomfortable and being great, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
You can't be great and not be willing to do those things. Occasionally someone is super talented, but not very often.
It seems like all the things you're doing too require tons of effort to prepare for them. So if you don't like the process, then
bingo.
How
That's
can
it. I'm in love with the process. Think about it. The winning. If if I look at the event as a whole, 100%, only like 1% is spent in that like moment of elation when you win. It's like, yes, I did it, but immediately the like rational brain kicks in, and I'm like, dude, you're not fucking special, so you want a raise. There's 125 people here. There's someone else that can beat you. Like, all right, what's next? It's almost like there's two voices in my head, and one of them's like keeping me in check. Like, yeah, I'd love to celebrate the win. I wish that I got more out of winning than I do. But I think that's what has helped me win, is that recognizing that the win isn't the goal. The process is the goal. Yeah. Living in that process of having a goal, working towards something, having meaning, having a purpose. And it's almost like the event, like in the Gobi Desert, it's almost like that. I didn't choose it in a weird way, and I don't want to sound like a douche, but I almost feel like it chose me. It was like, you want some of this? Why that race? I get presented with opportunities like all the time, more frequently now than ever before. And I say no to a lot of things unless it speaks to me. And something about that race was like, let's do this.
Yeah.
What the fuck do I know about Mongolia and the Gobi Desert? There was nothing in my past that was like, we need to do something like this. I saw it, it spoke to me, and I was like, I'm doing this.
Nice.
And until I got on the plane, walking on the plane, my mindset started to shift. But for, a month of preparing, I was scared shitless. I had every single doubt under the sun, but I'm writing a book, and one of the titles that I'm playing with is 51% Mindset, because you only need a small majority if you believe in majority rules. You only need a small majority to get the ball rolling to start some action, right? 49% of me, for sure, 49, at least 49, it might have been more at times, was like, fuck this, are you crazy? You're going to embarrass yourself. You can't go there. You don't know anything about this. But there was 1% louder on this side being like, we can do this. But when I started walking onto the airplane, literally, it was like a cliche. But the minute I started walking on, I was like, I'm going to fucking kill everybody. It's time. Let's go. And I was like, I was depressed. I was like, I'm leaving my wife, my kids for this selfish bullshit. I don't want to go to Mongolia. This is like, yes, I want to see Mongolia. It was gorgeous, but there was nothing like, nice, I'm going to the Caribbean for a week. I was like, holy shit, dude, I'm going to work. It could have been Siberia. I was just like, I didn't know anyone. I mean, I know Scott Daru, but like not well. We never hung out. I only know him professionally. So I got there, didn't know anyone. It was crazy, but like I said, I shifted my mindset when I was going there to like, you're going. It's time. I compare it to something like, and not to at all compare this to war, but like being drafted into the war. It's like, oh my God, I'm drafted. Well, there's no sense being scared anymore. You're going. Yeah. You're going. So you can either wallow around in why me, or you can get your head right with the fact that you're going, and you better fucking get your head right or you're going to get hurt. Yeah. That's how I felt.
Yeah, 100%. Like you committed, so
that's
you're
it.
You're going to finish it. You're going to finish it.
But you have to take that approach. Like, if you don't go 100%, you might get really hurt. It's like same thing with my kids playing contact sports and football and lacrosse. And I'm like, if you're scared, that's cool. Yeah, we all have a fear. But if you're not going 100%, that's when you get hurt. You stop pussyfooting around out there and looking around and trying to be timid. You're going to get your head taken off. You have to be going 100 miles an hour with conviction and believe in yourself. You still might get hurt, but the chances are much less likely if you're going fast than being timid out there. You're being timid, the action always finds the timid guy.
Yeah. Isn't the same kind of true in trail running too? Like, tread confidently. Like
100%.
you're probably gonna be a lot more stable going downhill if you're just like, nope, I'm going for it. Let's just do it. Make sure I have strong ankles and everything, but... Same
thing with descending on a mountain bike, which is one of the most dangerous things I've ever done. I was riding in Aspen once with Lance Armstrong, and we were very comparable on the flats and the hills. I mean, obviously he's not in the shape he was in, but he's still a beast. But I was in good shape, and we were cool. As soon as we got to the descent, I was like, all right, I'll see you at the bottom. That is such a technical skill. But to your point, when you're riding a mountain bike downhill, someone described it to me, Jimmy Riccatello, actually, who was former professional triathlete. He described to me like just surfing the bike. He's like, you just got to get on the bike and surf it. He's like, stop trying to control the bike and just go wherever it goes and go with the flow. You start jamming on the brakes and trying to like anticipate every nuance of the trail. He's like, get back on the seat, use the back brake only as much as possible, and just surf this bike. Let it do what it's gonna do. It's going to do shit that you don't think it can do, like going through gullies.
Yeah.
The mountain bike that's a real skill set, but that's what I think about when I think of like, you're on it, just ride it.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. I feel like skiing can be like that too.
Yes.
Where you're just like, well, I'm gonna commit and see what happens.
Yep.
Avoid the tree wells. I want to ask another question about running, because I think somewhere you mentioned that you started running at some point like 10 miles a day.
Yeah.
And so when was that? Why'd you decide 10 miles a day? Were you running before that? And I think you said like your first marathon was 3:30 or something, somewhere in that, which is amazing, right? And then you've literally cut an hour off that time.
Yes, but I ran that first marathon like when I was like not involved in endurance sports at all. It might have been like 1996. It wasn't like I didn't.
So it was like a couch one day.
Yeah, I trained for like probably 2 months, but I didn't know what I was doing. I probably had like, I think I wore Air Max sneakers, cotton shorts. Like I didn't know anything. And then I didn't do it.
I would say that's not average though.
No.
Like that's not super average to just like.
Yeah, but I trained a little bit, but nothing like what I would do. But then when I got into Ironman and I ran like a 3:15 marathon off the bike. So after a 112-mile bike ride, 2.5 mile swim. So I had like some running acumen after doing all the Ironman training. And then when I moved to LA and started to focus more on running and less on triathlon, I still would ride once or twice a week, long rides on the weekends on my bike. So like even up until 2020, I would ride like on at least one day a weekend, 50 to 100 miles every day. And I loved it. I loved training in Malibu. I loved riding through the hills with my friend Rob Moore, who produces Andrew Huberman's podcast. He's a beast. He won a marathon in Huntington Beach Marathon. He ran 2:30. But we did a ton of training together. And when I was working in finance, so I had, I have to be in work at like 8 o'clock or whatever. So I started getting up super early and I just run 10 miles in the trails up in the hills of Malibu. And it would be, my typical route would be 10 miles, have like 1,200 feet of elevation gain, which is fucking insane. That's like almost twice as much as the New York and or Boston Marathon, but over 10 miles, not 26. So there's some sections that were just straight up, and I just started getting stronger and stronger, and I entered the Malibu half marathon one year, and I came in second, and I was like, oh my God, I almost won a race. Like, I couldn't believe it. And then the next year I went back and I won. I won it 2 or 3 times. And then, funny enough, my friend Rob Moore, Andrew's partner, he moved to Malibu, and the year after I left and moved out of there, he did that without me, and he won it. So I was like, damn, dude, for like 5 years, either I won it or Rob won it 4 of the 5 years. So, Yeah, like I said, I just started doing 10 miles. I don't know why I picked 10 miles, but I was like, at a minimum, I'm going to run 10 miles every day. And with no goal or intention other than to just stay fit. And through doing that, I'd go down to the beach on the flats one day a week, and I'd do like 18 to 22 miles. So once I got within 10 weeks of a marathon. So with 10 weeks to go, I'd start doing one long run, and the rest of it would be 10 miles, maintenance miles every day. And I was able to go from, when I moved to LA from New York, I think I had run like a 2:45 marathon in New York one year, and I ended up getting down to 2:33 just doing the big miles. But I ran the 2:45 in New York when I was training a lot for triathlon, so I wasn't just running, but I was obviously training all the time.
And then when you were like just running those 10 miles for funsies, what kind of pace were you doing? Like, was this easy pace, zone 2,
That's a
or
good
were you
question.
trying to mess around with intervals, or was it just like...
Occasionally I'd do a fartlek that was basically like 10 minutes, a minute on, minute off, minute on, minute off. So I'd do something like that sometimes, but not really, without really knowing what I was doing. But there were definitely no structured workouts, not like I would do now. And basically, if I felt good, I'd run fast. If I didn't feel good, I'd just run. I'd just jog.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I do now if I'm not in marathon training mode. But in those hills with that kind of elevation gain, the way I would determine if I had run hard, if I could run under an average of 8-minute miles, sub, that would be the equivalent of like 5-minute mile, sub 6 on the road. So that's how I would kind of gauge it. But typically it would be like 8 to 9-minute miles, because it was, the first 2 miles were like 400 feet of elevation gain. So it was like almost, when people would come to run with me, very rarely could someone run the first 2 miles with me and stay the whole way. But I would do that every day.
Yeah.
And then when I just went out to Oregon and ran the mountains with Cam Haines, I was reminded of how strong I was at running mountains, because he was a beast. I ran with him the whole time, but I was working harder than I thought I would have to.
Have you had your VO2max tested?
No, that's the one that I really want to do.
I want to know.
I know.
But you said you wear a Garmin, so do you have an estimate? Was there an estimate?
Nah. Can you tell me how to do it?
Yeah.
I have all this stuff, but I don't. Maybe I have it in my bag. When I was doing triathlon, I had all the best stuff. I had a SRM power meter, I had all these metrics, but I never looked at them.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm just going on perceived effort for everything. But I do wonder where my VO2max is, as I understand that to be like a really strong indicator of longevity and overall health and wellness.
Yeah.
But I would hope and imagine that it would be high.
I'm sure it is. Actually, you can't perform at your level and have it be low. It's not. It's actually impossible.
I'm sure there's a lot of people like to see
I think you're doing fine. Not even remotely a question, but I do think it's definitely one of those great things to kind of like track over time.
I want to get VO2max and a DEXA scan done just to layer on top of everything we have, because as we're going to get into, like with the high ApoB, little a, and high cholesterol, that's all genetically motivated, is incredibly stressful to not have perfect health scores. Because in my mind, I'm like, on the outside and performance wise, you would think, oh, healthiest guy ever. Then I look at my blood test and my cholesterol levels, and I'm like, what the hell? Why is this happening to me?
So yeah, actually we can talk about that for sure. And I know you've done, I think DEXA scans are great. You get such awesome information.
Yeah.
And even just, I think it's wonderful to get a baseline value, right?
Yeah.
And then who knows, you can compare that to a DEXA scan 10 years from now and just see where things are going. Because as we know, as you age, you really have to work harder and harder and harder to keep up that muscle mass.
Yep.
And, and I know you've got to be I know you're also a boxer, right? So you've got a lot of different inputs, even outside of just endurance training, which is amazing. And that's what you want. And actually, I would love to ask you what your like typical week looks like in terms of training and stuff like that. But same with VO2max. I think you can go do a DEXA and a lab VO2max at the same time. It's fun to kind of compare it to what your estimates are on a Garmin. And Apple if you have one of those, and Fitbit. And
I would
so
imagine the Apple Watch would have an accurate, an accurate measurement, but I don't think that those watches measure, like the watch doesn't measure heart rate and VO2 max very accurately, from what I understand.
I mean, this is really one of my favorite topics to discuss because I can tell you right now that I've worn an Apple and a Garmin and had my VO2 max done.
Yeah.
Garmin is on point.
Really?
Right? Yeah, Garmin is like maybe 2 units off.
Dang.
Apple can be up to 19 units off in the lower direction. Like Apple basically is like, you're gonna keel over and die tomorrow. And I know what the lab values are, so I know Apple's inaccurate.
How do you find the heart rate monitor on the watch versus like a chest strap?
So I will only use a chest strap.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean.
Only use a chest strap, but I when I do these VO2 max estimates, like I make sure that I wear the chest strap and then I use the chest strap during that activity, and I will transmit the chest strap data to both the Apple and the Garmin. So even though their algorithms are different, they're at least getting the same heart rate input and stuff like that. So anyway, but yeah, in general, I think Apple's VO2 max estimates tend to be low comparatively, although, you know, it might be different for different people, things like that. So I'm always curious for people that wear multiple devices, you know, what those look like, because obviously at InsideTracker, we're just looking at this from a data science perspective.
We need a partnership with Whoop, InsideTracker and Whoop,
I
do
know.
some kind of collab.
I know. I haven't tried. Whoop probably gives you a VO2 max estimate too somewhere in there. I guess.
You think? I'm
Probably.
the worst when it comes to
poke around.
technicalities. But I love the guys at Whoop. I started working with them this year, and I love them. I love the product. I like the team. But I mean, to be honest with you, sometimes when I think about Whoop and I think about InsideTracker, I get the teams like crossed over, because I think of you guys as all kind of the same, like the Boston kind of health tech leaders. Honestly, I'm like, oh, they're interchangeable, even though I know it's not. But I mean that as a compliment to both companies. I love working with both. You guys are guys all like have passionate like thought leaders in the space. It's refreshing.
This is true. We are very passionate, and we can certainly slurp in Whoop data if you filter it through Apple Health Kit, and then we can pull that in and use that as additional information as part of your analysis and stuff like that to provide additional color on what your blood results look like.
Hell yeah.
So you've done 2 InsideTrackers, you've done 2 Ultimates with us, you've done a DNA test. I guess first question might be, what was interesting to you? Like, what was a surprise, good or bad?
The ApoB, elevated ApoB, was shockingly negative. I was just devastated. I mean, honestly, I had a few days where I was like, I'm definitely going to die of a heart attack. This sucks. And I don't want to die of a heart attack. It caused me real anxiety, like no bullshit. I was just frustrated, and my wife was like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I'm so pissed. Look at everything I'm doing, and I've got this stupid ass cholesterol. And then eventually, through talking to like Michelle and some other people over at InsideTracker, I was just like, and then doing my own research too, talking to people like Andrew Huberman and David Sinclair, and just kind of come into grips with the fact that some of this stuff is genetic and you can't really control it. But I was like, all right, but what am I going to do for what kind of steps or protocols am I going to put in place? Actually, I keep missing Simon Hill, but I've spoken to Simon a while, and he has some very strong convictions and views on this topic. So I'm going to eventually link with Simon and kind of put some protocols in place to try to lower it. There's a part of me that's like, all right, I know I've got to fix this, but it's like someone who's out of shape losing weight. You're like, I'm going to start this, I just don't know when. But I do really want to start to think about it. And I know you mentioned statins as a possible cholesterol lower. And prior to kind of hearing your thoughts about it, I was very anti-pharmaceuticals. I was like anti-intervention in terms of drugs. But if it will help me live a little longer, I guess I'm down to try whatever.
I mean, I think you're in a you're in a good position here in that, like, you figured it out early, right? And B, I think, especially for you, the genetics results are really interesting. So you did pop up as having an elevated risk of having high ApoB, which means that you're bumping up against a genetic wall, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that you can't get your ApoB levels down, despite that at all. But it just means that it's going to be harder for you compared to somebody else who might have a different genetic risk for ApoB. And sometimes that information can be really helpful. So, I would say that, I mean, we love Simon Hill and totally we obviously, there are different recommendations that are part of the InsideTracker program too that are, will give you guidance on actual clinical studies that have been shown that if you do this intervention, actual human beings have been able to lower their LDL cholesterol, their ApoB levels, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that your reaction to this and not wanting to jump to pharmaceuticals is like perfectly reasonable, and lots of people feel that way, and you always have that option after you exhaust the other ones. But I think, if you exhaust all those other options and your ApoB is not moving to where you want it to be, then you have done everything possible, and you really have rammed up against the genetics wall. And you can't, it is statistically impossible to win the genetics lottery for everything, okay?
Yep.
So,
that is the one thing that I love about the InsideTracker and the app, is that it actually provides you with real scientific data and suggestions for intervention or intervention protocols. And that's a huge plus, because you get this, if you get a traditional blood work back, unless you have a physician or a caretaker walking you through what everything means, it might as well be written in a foreign language. The nice thing about InsideTracker is that it breaks down everything, biomarker by biomarker, and gives you, like I said, scientific data to support everything that it's guiding in terms of this is elevated risk. Why? Here are all the reasons why. Here are some interventions you can try. And I love the idea of trying these things, then going back and retesting.
Yeah.
And even with the test, for people out there that are like, oh, it's a little bit expensive. How much is your life worth, man? You wouldn't think twice about spending, a few $100s on a fancy dinner and getting shit-faced drunk and doing things that are completely counterproductive to your health. But the idea of spending a little bit of money to find out where you stand and measure, probably the most important indicator of your longevity, your blood work, is insane to me. What is your life worth? There is no price tag. Guarantee you, if you find out that you had some kind of biomarker or early indicator for some cancer that you caught before you had to get seriously involved cancer treatments, because most of those things, if you catch them early,
that's your best chance.
Exactly. 100%. So the question is are you crazy? What's your life worth, man?
Yeah.
These are things that should be non-negotiables, like getting blood work done regularly and making sure you're on top of it. For guys, getting whatever the PSA, the prostate scan, whatever PSA stands for. But basically, those things are the best early indicators for problems with prostate, which, like we were discussing earlier, most men, if you live long enough, will have an issue with prostate, whether cancer or otherwise.
Yes.
Which is scary.
It's totally scary.
But it's not. If you can catch that early, it's very treatable. If you don't catch it early, you got a fucking problem now, and it could be real bad.
Yes, 100%. No, I actually treated myself this year to a cancer test.
Or one of those full body scans.
No, it wasn't. It's actually a blood test. I feel like we're plugging them right now, but we get no kickbacks for this. The Galleri test through, I forget which company makes it, but basically what it does is it looks at circulating tumor DNA in your blood, and it will test for a variety, panoply of different cancers.
Yeah.
And
how much was the test?
It was, I think it was somewhere between $750 and $900. Like it's it is not super cheap.
I
Like
know,
I
but
said, I
it's
treated myself to it. Like that was.
It's a price though that everyone should be willing to pay,
Yeah,
especially.
I'm cancer paranoid, so I wanted to know. I wanted to know.
And I don't know. Well, I don't know how old you are, but for me, I'm 52. I'll be 53 in May. But I would say when I turned 50, not exactly on the day, but in the last couple of years, I've become hyper aware of all that shit. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard enough looking at yourself and see that you're getting older. The thought of letting something go, like a potential cancer diagnosis that you could
Have caught earlier.
like, come on,
Yeah.
man. If you talk to someone who's going through cancer treatment who didn't catch it early, and I'll guarantee you they would have given every friggin' penny they have to have avoided the complications that they're having. And you only have to see someone go through that once to recognize that, like, don't be crazy.
Totally.
There's a lot of things that we waste money on. That ain't a waste of money.
No, I watched my mom die of pancreatic cancer, and it was just the
worst.
worst.
The worst.
It was the worst, right? And it's like she had no shot because by the time pancreatic cancer is diagnosed, it's too late. And actually, this particular test is fairly good at detecting pancreatic cancers a little bit earlier when you actually do have a shot. Otherwise, I am not part of any type of screening protocol within the hospitals, like you do for colonoscopies,
That's right.
And like mammograms and or PSA, right? There are different ways for a handful of cancers, but a lot of cancers, there is no screening. So I'm pretty psyched to see stuff like that on the market now. I hope that it gets covered by insurance. I hope we can,
It's so crazy that an insurance company wouldn't want to pay for these tests. It goes against all conventional wisdom. If you can catch that, okay, you have to pay $1,000 per patient. But if you catch that, the treatment for early detection versus late detection is like, you're talking like potentially millions. Like it doesn't make any sense. But I got my first colonoscopy this year. Oh my God. So I don't want to say a terrible experience and scare people away from it, because look, we're fucking being adults. If you're over 50, you need a colonoscopy. But it sucks. It sucks. I found that the fasting was the hardest thing, a 24-hour fast, and then they give you
the drugs they give you once you show up are amazing. It's a great time. You're psyched at that point because you're so miserable. You're like anything.
I got a colonoscopy and an endoscopy at the same time, so they go down your throat at the same times. They go up your butt. So as I'm getting ready to go, they're going to put this thing in my mouth to hold my mouth open so I can put it down. And as they're about to put this thing that looks like a ball gag in my mouth, and I'm like in a thing, I was like, hold on. Guys, do me a favor, please. Don't take pictures of me. I feel so vulnerable. But once it was over, like I said, I was like, had tremendous peace of mind that, they were like, you're good to go.
And you kind of like find out right away,
exactly,
too, if there's any polyps in there.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I have a very strong family history of colon cancer, and I started getting them, I think, at 40.
Yep.
So I would also urge people, if there's any type of particular cancer in your family and you have not already alerted your doctor to it, like, there may be a protocol where you can kind of get in earlier than Gen Pop. But yeah. So, I mean, even going back to the InsideTracker blood results, obviously InsideTracker is not looking for cancer biomarkers or anything like that, but you can get a general sense of other types of conditions, whether it's cardiovascular health, whether it's metabolic health, where you stand in terms of inflammation. And all these things can play into things like your cognitive decline later on in life, etc. But like, it's a lot of things that are highly reversible, especially with lifestyle interventions. Although your metabolic markers look great, too. But these are things where, like, there's actually, if you detect them early, you can work on, there's action. You can work on those for a little while and see what happens. And if you are banging your head against a wall, then go talk to your doctor and, see what they think and that.
But this is, I always tell people, we're all born with one main responsibility, and it trumps everything else in your life, and that's the responsibility to take care of yourself. You are responsible for yourself. You're responsible for the way you feel. You're responsible emotionally. You have to own that. And if you don't like the way you feel, you have to fix it. Otherwise, you can do what I did and self-medicate and find yourself in a horrible hole of addiction. And the same thing goes for your physical health as well as your mental health. Take responsibility for yourself. That's your job. It's more important than taking care of your damn kids. Because if you don't take care of yourself, eventually those kids are going to take care of you. Yeah. And that sucks for kids. That is like one of the biggest motivating factors for me in my life to want to get this under control is I don't want to have something like a stroke or some kind of like ailment where now all of a sudden my children have to take care of me because hopefully I've raised the kind of kids that are like, that of course we would do that, but you don't want that for them.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a huge loss, right? Because now you're incapacitated and you're watching your kids have to take care of yourself. And this is the easiest way to do it. And nothing makes me happier than working with a company that I agree wholeheartedly with the mission statement, and that is to have people take control of their own physical as well as mental health and own this. Stop waiting for someone to tell you it's time to go to the doctor, especially if you're in your 50s. Like, be an adult, go take care of your shit.
That's an interesting point too, and like we've been talking about this a lot. We were talking about it with actually a physician that we work with really closely, and he was saying that a lot of men, especially in their 30s, are just not going to the doctors, right? And like they're not hitting the doctors until they're somewhere in mid 40s maybe, and something goes wrong. Like it's probably going to be prostate issues or something like that, and that's what. That's where they present. And they missed like a 15, 20-year opportunity before that. So it's, even just whether you go to the doctor, whether you do InsideTracker or not, like even just taking a peek inside, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It might be scary, but to your point, you deal with scary stuff all the time. So.
Any of the people that are important to me in my life, like not doing stuff like this, InsideTracker or whatever you're gonna do, like to me it's unacceptable. Like my wife and I, we like stay on this stuff, and I'm like, even if you don't want to do it for yourself, I don't want to do it for myself. Like I have a wife and 4 kids. Like what kind of example are you setting if you don't take care of yourself? And it's like you were just talking about with kids. Like, yeah, I don't want to go to the doctor. Of course I don't. I'd rather friggin' get hit by a car. Like I go there when I have to, until I got a little bit older and was like, yo, I got 4 people dependent on me. Like I need to be here until at the very least they're educated and become their own adults. I'm sure they'd want me to keep me a lot longer, but at a minimum, I got to maintain my vitality until they're adults themselves. I always tell them I gotta take care of myself just long enough so you guys are capable to take care of me for me.
Exactly. And actually now that we're talking about kids and prevention, and it's a little off topic here, but I think it's really important. I know we've talked about the genetic risk for elevated ApoB. We talked a little bit, at the current time, InsideTracker doesn't offer LP(a) testing, although it might be something sooner rather than later that we could add to our genetic testing, because we know that LP(a) levels are highly determined by your genetics, right? Yep. There really isn't a lot of lifestyle interventions that you could do to move your LP(a) levels, because it's just
because both of mine are high and it pisses me off, and I'm like, what? Everything that all of those markers, LP(a), ApoB, and like the bad cholesterol metrics are high for me, and I'm like, I don't eat the healthiest diet ever. I mean, relative to the general population, I'm a health nut. Compared to guys like that are really into their diet, like a Rich Roll, for instance, my diet's probably shit. But as we've discussed, when you have those genetically high biomarkers, there's not a lot that you can control with your diet. So then I get into this weird like push and pull thing of like, how much do I want to suffer in terms of not feeling satisfied when I eat versus like living longer. Well, if suffering and not enjoying a decent meal now and then, by decent I mean like maybe like steak or something that doesn't align well with lowering cholesterol. What's the trade-off there? if it's not going to really move the needle, then why should I be miserable and deny
Yeah.
myself these things? But I also don't want to do anything to further contribute to the cholesterol situation I'm dealing with. So I'm like in this weird place where I don't know what to do.
But you're going to figure it out. I am
That's true.
I'm not really worried about this because,
That part is true.
and this is like the fun thing about, the space that we're all in here is right. Like, and, I come from a background where I was mostly doing personalized medicine and looking at like, what is the impact of this drug on a large group of people?
Yeah.
What's cool about, more of the lifestyle intervention space is like, you can tinker with yourself,
Yep.
right? Like you can absolutely. So what you're going to do is you are going to go create a plan for yourself. And, there's lots of great suggestions from InsideTracker. I know you've got buddies like Simon Hill, and you're going to figure out like the lipid lowering protocol that you're going to be on, and you're going to try it for a reasonable amount of time. I don't know if it's a month or two, but something.
Yeah.
We would be happy to test you before and after if you want to like make it a dedicated challenge, right? Make sure you get everything done before and after, and then you will have measured it. The measurement is there, and you'll know exactly how subjectively miserable you were during this protocol. And then you can make a decision from that point and say, all right, well, maybe let's just say the numbers move to exactly where you want. Then you can make a decision and say, all right, well, can I dial it back a little bit and maybe incorporate more of the things that you want in there? And then retest again 2 months later and see, okay, well, am I still doing okay, or did things go off the rails? So you're going to do that, and it's going to be interesting, and I want to hear about it. I want to know. And then if you do all of that and nothing moves, then you have your answer.
Yeah,
that's your answer. Go talk to your doctor at that point, because you did every single thing that you could that was in your power, and you're going to feel a lot better about talking to your doctor and making a decision if you had to go on pharmaceuticals or not. You're going to feel a lot better about it, I think.
One of the things that I really want to try, and that I believe that processed foods and a lot of sugar is like having a fairly negative effect on me, because when I see, I have a handful of friends that are super healthy that eat like a heavy, like carnivore type diet, but that in a lot of the things that I've read, it suggests that like processed carbs, like white bread, pasta, white rice, versus a diet that's high in fat and protein and low on carbs, but like focuses on good fats for energy, like to kind of get into a ketosis state. I'm wondering if a diet like that might be beneficial to me, but again, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like my glucose levels and stuff. Like, I feel like I eat too much processed food, too much processed crap, and I like treat myself to like a dessert every now and then. And it's easy when I'm training a lot to be like, you know what, I ran 15 miles today, I'm gonna have a piece of cake. But I just feel like that stuff is super detrimental to your overall health and wellness.
Honestly, and I am not a registered dietitian. I'm not a nutritionist. So like my background is molecular biology, and so you should trust people who actually have appropriate nutrition degrees with this answer. And Michelle, Simon, all these folks.
Okay.
But from everything that I understand, and I have the great pleasure of getting to work with a lot of people with this expertise, is in general, processed food is it should be cut out as much as possible. Yeah. My guess is you are not consuming that much of it, right?
Not relative to the general population.
Right. I mean, I can't, like, if we have to live in a world where one piece of cake is really going to knock you off your rails, like unless you're like actually type 1 or 2 diabetic, like that's a different story.
Well, I'm curious
which you
to
are
see.
Definitely not. But I will tell you, like, the other thing, too, is, like, you do a ton of endurance training, right? You know when the best time to eat a simple carb is?
Right after?
Right after a run. Yeah. Right after a run. It doesn't have to be
a
hard run.
Problem is I'm never really hungry for that kind of stuff after. It's like at night, after I've had dinner, right before I go to bed, I'm like, oh, I'm dying for a piece of pie or very rarely ice cream, but stuff like that, like sweets.
I
But
totally
one thing
hear
I do
you.
try to avoid, if it's something that my wife has made, I'm more likely to consume a lot of it. But I really try to stay away from anything that can live on the shelf. I try to avoid, like Girl Scout cookies as an example, or like a store-bought pie that could stay on the counter for like a week and there would be no problem.
Yeah.
Anything that has that kind of preservatives and those kind of stabilizers in it, it bums me out when I have a moment of weakness and consume that kind of stuff.
They are delicious.
Oh, I
Sometimes.
could eat a
Like,
whole cake of
I'm
Entenmann's
not
cake,
gonna
but
lie. Yeah, I mean, I think I had this wonderful conversation with Dan Buettner, and we were talking about how toasters are bad for you because they can, having them around means you can just like quickly toast things that are delicious. And I was like, I totally ate 2 Pop-Tarts for dinner the other night.
oh,
I was tired. They were there. I didn't buy them, but like
Pop-Tarts are so
I
good.
was like I had nothing all day, and then here I am consuming pop. I am not a great example for a perfect diet,
And
but I
Pop-Tarts
don't eat Pop Tarts every day.
they're really good, delicious, but that's one of those foods where if I have it like once every 2 or 3 years, that would be a lot. Just because I look at it and I feel like it's such a symbol of like everything that's wrong with processed food. I'm like, this
Yeah.
Pop Tart can be in my closet for 2 years and eat it. I'm like, it doesn't
Nuclear
make sense.
holocaust.
It
Like, you're
doesn't
fine.
make sense.
They're gonna be great when that happens to us,
Exactly.
right? But your glucose is amazing.
Oh,
It's
awesome.
amazing, and your HbA1c is amazing. So your glucose and HbA1c for both your blood draws were in the optimal zones. Like you're looking at your fasted glucose 85 and 84. Your HbA1c is 5 and 5.1. What are you, 51? You
52.
said it's amazing. Yeah, those. From an insulin sensitivity standpoint, you are crushing it. I didn't see anything. I don't think that you have any. None of your elevated risks in terms of genomics were in the kind of metabolic dysregulation spectrum at all. So, you're not having to overcome a genetic hurdle, number one, and number two, with the sheer amount of movement and running you were doing, even if you had that genetic hurdle, I think you'd be doing fine. So
One other thing that I did, by the way, when I got my about a year ago, when I went to the cardiologist, when I first got the maybe after the first blood draw, I went to a cardiologist and said, "Hey, I've got these high markers. Like, what should I do?" And he basically ordered a CT scan of my heart. It's some kind of new kind of test where they gave me contrast fluid.
Yeah.
Then they gave me dilators, so it would dilate the blood vessels, and I had the contrast. And then they basically took a real 3D scan, real time, of my actual heart vessels, like whatever those different arteries are called that can get blocked. The Widowmaker one, and they said that the frustrating thing is, look, we measure it on a 0 blockage, less than 25, less than 50, less than blah blah blah. And he was like, you're not at 0, but you're less than 25. He's like, you're the first step off of like perfect. And I'm like, okay, does that mean I'm at 2% blockage or 24? That's a big difference. And he's like, yeah, we don't really measure it like that. I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake, this is good, causing me more harm than good. Now I'm like convinced it must be 24. And it could be 2.
Yeah, this is the coronary artery calcium
Yes.
test. Yeah, I
don't-
had one of those too.
I don't
recently.
think it was the calcium score. It was literally just a CT scan of the heart where they actually measure the diameter of the arteries or whatever arteries, veins, whatever it was. They measured the blockage in the like main, anterior ventricle, whichever the Widowmaker artery is in your heart. And like I said, it wasn't the best score, but it was, it could have been a lot worse. And the guy was like, I said, dude, should I come back next year? He's like, no, I'll see you in 5 years. And I'm like,
Okay.
So that made me feel good. The problem,
But that's honestly where I would poke a little harder.
here's the problem. Here's the
I
problem.
feel like I sure can't come back
When
here.
you have any plaque in those arteries, my friend Tim O'Donnell, who's a professional triathlete, in this story was like widely publicized and written about. He was doing a half Ironman in Miami, and he just got really sick during the race, like throwing up, just felt like death, but not like, I think his left arm might have went a little bit numb, but he's a professional triathlete, went to Naval Academy, skinny as a rail. It was just like, what the hell is going on with me? But then started to really fall ill. Well, when you have any plaque at all, the way that the blockage happens, it's not like it just slowly over time blocks and then one final molecule closes it off. The plaque that's in there breaks off, gets twisted, gets lodged. These arteries, like people think of I thought when I'm thinking of like it's like a straw, like like it must be big. This thing is like like a number 2 pencil, draw a line with a sharpened pencil. That's like the width of what it looks like when you look at it under a microscope. A little piece of plaque broke off in that widowmaker artery of his, and he had like a massive heart attack that theoretically should have killed him. They think because he was so fit, he got to the hospital, they saw it and were like, oh my God, rushed him into emergency surgery, put a stent in, and he's good. But he's another one who was like, so I talked to him about it because he had the same high markers, the same ApoB, and he said he wasn't taking a statin. He was taking a baby aspirin and just monitoring it. But it was interesting. But I mean, he might be a little bit younger than me, but he's got young children like me, and it was man, it was scary when you think about that actually happening to you. Like, the good news is when you know all the information and have all the information that I now have, if I did start to have a symptom of like, oh, something doesn't feel right. Like, believe me when I tell you, I ain't waiting until I fall down to call 911. Knowing that is, that I'm at risk of that potentially, I know that if you start to feel those early symptoms right away, it's to be like, because if you can get intervention, even with a heart attack, I think if they said if you get hit with an IED or you get, proper treatment, you have like 5-10 minutes to like fix them. But it's if you don't know what's happening and you're not prepared and you haven't done these kind of things and you don't have an IED available or there's no way to kind of signal something like, I think I'm having a heart attack. Believe me, I've gone over this whole protocol with my wife. She thinks I'm crazy. I'm like, this is what you're gonna do. I'm serious. I'm like, I've got too many responsibilities to not handle this like an adult. So I mean, we have an IED coming to the house. That IED, even when children, like recently, a lot of kids have had heart attacks at sporting events, like high school age kids. Who would know what could possibly like be affecting so many children across the whole system with sudden heart attacks? But that's another conversation, COVID. But they say if you can get that IED on the kids, like 9 times out of 10, they'll save them if it's administered, let's say within 5 minutes. 60 minutes did a whole study on it. It scared the crap out of me, so I was like, we have to have one of these.
In the house. Totally. I don't have an IED in the house. It's a good question. I do have actually one of those like basically choking plungers because I'm like super paranoid about choking and like the kids choking and like I used to not allow my daughter to eat Jolly Ranchers unless I was in the room. Like
you are paranoid.
Like a little mental. I also like have a fear of going over a bridge in a car, so I've got all the like hammers in the car. Like I gave them out to like people I worked with one year at Christmas.
I give my kids tutorials and pop quizzes on Heimlich maneuver all the time.
You need this plunger vacuum.
100%.
And I have a travel version that I keep in the car with me. I've like told the kids where it is. I've had them like practice on the kitchen table. They're like, why can't we practice on you? I'm like, just feel that suction and you will understand why.
Well, I saved someone with a Heimlich once. I was at a banquet at the New York Athletic Club. My friend Booker Poole, shout out to Booker. We were sitting there having dinner. It was like a bunch of Olympic triathletes. I was on the board of the triathlon committee for the New York Athletic Club. And sitting there eating with Booker. And he turns to me and gave the universal sign of like 2 hands to his throat. I was like, get out of the way. I stormed over there, grabbed him, and I Heimlicked his ass so hard 2 times. Boom! Big giant piece of shrimp cocktail came up and he was like, you just saved my life. Yeah. He's like, I was literally like, I'm gonna die. And I'm like, not on my watch, my boy.
No, I want this guy in the room if I'm ever joking. Like, not a question. You gotta love, like, the people who are gonna be like,
oh, no.
Is everything okay? Oh, no.
Crazy thing is,
go for it. Just go.
2 years before that, we were driving up, me, Shelby, and my 3 children at the time, we were driving to Mont Tremblant for a triathlon. And we pulled into a rest stop, and a elderly couple pulled in, just coincidentally right beside us. And I see the woman come around to the passenger side, and she's kind of struggling with the husband. He's like a bigger guy, but he was old. But it turns out he had brain cancer, but he looked really old. So he's not feeling well, and they pulled off there. Just coincidentally, we were there. So I come over, I'm like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, oh, he has brain cancer. He doesn't feel good. I'm like, is he having a heart attack? And she's like, I don't know, maybe. So I'm like, I see there's a police car there, a state trooper. This is upstate New York in the middle of nowhere. I say to my wife, run in there and find that cop and tell him to get out here quick,
Yeah.
call an ambulance while you're going. So the guy quickly deteriorated. He's looking at me like blankly, and I'm like, yo, you all right, man? And then I lean him back in the chair inside the car, and then I'm like, I just pulled him out, laid him down on the ground. Someone randomly had a tarp, and then other people started coming to help. But he was just struggling in and out, and then eventually the ambulance came, and my wife's trying to comfort his wife, but the children are there and seeing kind of. My nanny took them all away, but it was very traumatic because afterwards the kids were like, Dad, what was happening? And I said, oh, he just wasn't feeling well. But I mean, I get choked up now thinking about it. It fucking traumatized me for a long time, just seeing someone like basically lose their
Struggling.
life.
Yeah,
And because
I
he would
know.
eventually, they had to do not resuscitate because he was so sick, and they took him out of there and he didn't make it. But it was tragic. I was like, man, that and all the things you're talking about with the plunger and the high, like, I want to know those things because I don't want to experience that. At
Yeah.
least not if I'm there and it's and you can fix it for
There's
the
a way to
moment.
prevent.
Yeah, for sure.
So even like going back to the scenario that you're in where you are super fit, bumping up against a genetic lottery, even if you're not in the genetic lottery, I'd say that the situation where you have a genetic risk of having elevated ApoB, right? So drawing the short straw on that lottery, I guess. And it's not, it's not a 100% penetrant trait or anything like that. So obviously people with elevated risk can have great normal ApoB, but it just might be harder to move. High LDL, high total cholesterol is like, I know that we talk a lot about this now where it's all about the area under the curve, meaning like, how many years have you been living with elevated lipids?
Yep.
And you want to minimize that, right? And you can minimize it by, lowering those levels. The sooner you find out, the sooner you can do anything about it. But that's kind of where you are. I would say also, given that you have had them look for plaque and you weren't at plaque 0, I mean, I would run your experiments like now. Just go get it over with.
Yeah. No, I think that's what my next step is going to be, is to try a statin and see how that does. But I also want to try experiment with this. I hesitate to call it a carnivore diet, but like a high in protein and fat diet, and really cut down on, certainly more on processed food. Not that I ate a lot, but I want to cut that down. And I also want to cut down on sugar consumption. Like, just there's so much sugar in everything, especially anything that's processed.
There is this one paper, and they've literally only shown this in one paper, and it was cross-sectional. And I can't remember the author of the paper. I can look all of this stuff up later. But it was actually interesting, and it was looking at, I think, LDL levels in people who were, kind of consuming this high-fat diet with very few carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. And what the hypothesis there was that, like, for some people that actually had a low BMI, which really, we just mean a proxy for body fat percentage. Yeah. So for you, obviously, like, you're going to have a low body fat percentage. It was actually beneficial for these people to have, not to be in ketosis. And to have some level of carbohydrates. Yeah. And given, like, if I don't know if you've tinkered with a ketogenic diet, but given all of the performance goals you have, I can't imagine, like, that's hard. I mean, it's very hard. I don't think anybody, it's pretty hard to be expending all of those calories without carbohydrate consumption.
Yeah, well, that's what I've struggled with. And
given your glucose measurements, I don't like that. Again, I'm not a clinician, but and you'll talk to the real deals, but it seems to me like you can mess with the dietary pieces. You've already got the exercise pieces down, but
yeah, one of the things that I was talking to Andrew Huberman's partner, Rob Moore, who's like super well read on all this stuff, he was saying to me, I was like, dude, my carb choices at night they're not great because I just feel like I'm run down, I'm weak, and I'll eat like junk food. And he's like, dude, you need so many carbs. He's like, that may actually be, in a weird way, it may be benefiting you in terms of performance because, okay, you're getting it as simple sugar and it's processed. It could be a little bit better, but he's like, the way your body looks and the way you've been performing, this may be actually the right balance for you. So you don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole with like, I'm cutting out all sugar. It's like, put it this way. I can't afford to be any skinnier than like 4 or 5 pounds max off my weight. And at that point, my wife will be like, don't you dare weigh less than me. So, it's a fine line between, I don't want to, like, part of the reason that I spent, and you asked earlier about maybe talking about activities for a week. Maybe after this weekend, I can talk through like a typical day, in a couple of different days, like a weekend day versus a weekday. And I'll explain what I mean. But, I don't have many places to go in terms of my body weight. I think it's at my ideal weight. I feel like I still look like a man and not like a skinny runner. And like, for a 52-year-old man, I'm not looking to be big, but I certainly don't want to look like skinny and weak in general.
So you have to keep your protein consumption up no matter what. And I don't.
So you want me to describe to you like a typical week?
I want to know if you like Triscuits though first. How do you feel about Triscuits?
Triscuits, the crackers that come in a box? Indifferent, good, bad. I mean, I don't dislike them, but I wouldn't. I was going to say I wouldn't buy a box, but I haven't been in a supermarket in like 15 years.
Like they're no wheat thin, but they have like
same.
I think there's like 4 ingredients in them, no preservatives.
Really?
Besides salt. They're actually, So I have a night cheese problem where all I want to do is eat cheese and crackers like after.
Oh, my wife is like a cheese junkie.
Yeah, I mean it's just hook me up.
Cheese. She'll take a cheese plate and not even order dinner.
She and I could be friends.
I eat the cheese too, but then I need the like fig spread and the honey and the fruit, and she's just like, I'll just eat the cheese.
Yeah, no, the fig spread.
I need all the accoutrements.
I agree, but I have been told by the experts at InsideTracker that the choice of eating Triscuits with my night cheese problem at least is pretty good because it's a whole grain. And there's just very few ingredients, no preservatives. There's salt.
Oh, that's good to know.
Crunch.
Because I would take a wheat. I would take a wheat thin over a Triscuit, but knowing that the Triscuit has more health benefits, I would
go Triscuit.
Yeah, I would do that.
Not a sponsor, by the way.
So, typical day, let's say like Monday through Friday looks like this. I get up typically around 6. And if I can, sleep to me is the most important. I think sleep's more important than exercise. Like everything happens with sleep.
How many hours of sleep do you get on average?
If I had my druthers and I could sleep without having to get up to pee 3 times, I'd prefer to get 8 hours, but I would say I get an average of 6 to 7. But I prefer to have more. Yeah. I think sleep is the number one performance enhancer in the world, and mastering the art of sleeping is important. It really is. Like, you can just look at kids. My kids don't sleep. One of them went to a sleepover and was up most of the night. He literally was acting like a monster. I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? Why are you talking to me like that, talking back? And I'm just like, you know what? You didn't sleep. There's no more. If you can't manage your sleep and go there and sleep when it's time for a sleepover, you're not going to go anymore. Because I'm not going to have you come home and mistreat us by being rude, And so I would typically, let's say I get up at 6. I'll have 2 cups of coffee, a lot of water. I'll take some supplements. I'll take fish oil in the morning. Sometimes I'll take tyrosine and some alpha GPC like nootropics. And I'll take Tongat Ali, which is a natural testosterone booster. It's like some kind of root or herb. I'll take that and a coffee and just water. Occasionally I'll have like a collagen shot. It's basically like just some protein and it looks like a gel from Momentous. A collagen shot. But I don't really consume any calories, so to speak. Occasionally, if I'm really feeling depleted, I will have ketone IQ, which is basically like androgynous ketones. But that's it. Very simple, and a lot of water. And then as soon as I get back from working out, so let's say if I get up, it's on a typical day, if I get up at 6 and can be out the door by 7:30 to 8, I usually like to have 90 minutes to 2 hours of being awake, drinking a lot of water and a little, like 2 cups of coffee, but, Keurig cups, like not crazy strong caffeine. Then I'll run. Then when I come back, I'll take a momentous recovery shake, just basically some simple carbs and a little protein mixed in with some athletic greens, like the all-in-one green drink. And I will take some more fish oil. I'm a big fish oil guy. I'll take a daily vitamin, and I'll take vitamin D and some zinc. And then I'm good to go. So that's, let's say if I get out the door at 8:30, so by 10 a.m. and I work before I go, and then I could potentially take work calls while I'm running. I work it into my schedule. The nice thing about not having a 9 to 5 job is I have the flexibility to do it the way I want to do it. So I will then come back, get in my office. I'll work for the most of the day, and then typically around 4:30 p.m. I'll lift weights for 30 minutes, and the weightlifting consists of a lot of pull-ups, really basic movements, bench press, dips, body weight as much as possible, sit-ups on a decline sit-up board, some cable crossovers. I'll do some dumbbell movements just to keep like some dynamic movement going. I'll do some kettlebell swings for my hamstrings and legs. Once or twice a week I'll do squats. Not crazy heavy, but like, maybe I'll get up to like 200 pounds starting at 135 and then just get increasingly higher. And that's it, like 30 minutes. And I don't mess around when I'm in the gym. I'm like, I go hard. It's like I get my head around the fact that what's about to happen, because one of my pet peeves is someone working out but just like wasting time. Like, you're working out but you're not even really trying. You're like chit-chatting while you're doing the main exercise. It should be intentional, focused, uncomfortable weight. It shouldn't be that easy or you're not going to get stronger. So
you do that every day? Do you do resistance work every day?
So I would say I do that resistance training at least 3, typically 4 times a day. Let's say in a perfect world, I'll do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and maybe Wednesday I'll take day off from weightlifting. But I run every day. Mm-hmm. And then on the weekends, I typically don't lift weights, but I'll do my long run on Saturday. So call it 15 to 22 miles. And then Sunday, usually it'll be like an easy day. I'll do 10, 12 miles and then try to like use that as essentially my recovery day. Yeah. But on the days when I'm not at my gym and I'm not at home, at a minimum, if I can get someplace where there's a chin-up bar, like my favorite, like kind of hotel workout, or I'll do this when we go on vacation to my in-laws in Shelter Island. My brother-in-law put a random pipe in between the beams in their garage, so there's a chin-up bar there. Uh-huh. So I typically do 20 to 30 pull-ups at a time, like in varying grips. So overhand, underhand. I try to change it up all the time so you're not getting used to any one thing. But I would do like, let's say 25 pull-ups, and then I'll do 100 push-ups in a short break in between, very short. I'm trying to get this over with. And then I'll end up doing a total of 60 pull-ups, because then I'll do, typically 3 or 4 sets of 15. Uh-huh. And then I'll do a total of 200 push-ups. So I'll do, say 25 pull-ups and then 15 pull-ups, then 10 pull-ups, something like that. But I'll get to like 50 or 60. And pull-ups, 100 push-ups. Pull-ups, 50 push-ups. Pull-ups, 50 push-ups. So I get 200 push-ups and 50 to 60, 70 pull-ups. That to me is like a great kind of hotel or road workout when you can't get into a real gym. But if I don't have a chin-up bar, then I'll just do push-ups like 100, 75, 50, 50, 75, and then try to do 100 again. Uh-huh. But a lot. But it's like anything. It's like you're going to get out exactly what you put in. So if you put in a half-ass workout, like, you shouldn't expect to get good results. So, I think one of the things that I struggle with this sometimes is doing the same thing consistently over and over. It's easy to get into a rut or a routine where you're just like going through the motions. So I constantly reminding myself, like, it ain't going to get easier if you don't keep doing this. Yeah. It's only going to get harder now with age. So.
And then what do you do in terms of like lunch and dinner and getting protein and stuff like that in?
So a typical day is after I do my run, and let's say I get done around 10 a.m., I'll have the recovery shake with athletic greens, a little bit of supplements. And then about an hour later, my typical routine is my wife will make me a big salad, and we put it in a Ziploc bag, and it's got like bib lettuce, spinach, romaine chopped up, and then it's got edamame, peppers, onions. Sometimes I'll put black beans in there. Sometimes I'll put beets in after the fact so it doesn't stain the whole thing red. But I try to put in as much vegetables as possible, and then I'll put on the top some sort of salad topper nut mix. So it's got like nuts, maybe dried cranberries, but a lot of nuts. And I love to put hard-boiled eggs in there. So if I put 3 hard-boiled eggs, maybe I'll take 1 or 2 of the yolks out. So it's just a lot of egg whites, but I don't take all the yolks out. And I try to put some kind of like avocado oil based salad dressing on it, and I try not to skimp on the salad dressing because I'm like, if I'm eating this salad with nothing else on it, yeah, exactly. I want it to be good. Then for a snack, I would typically have like a handful of nuts. I love pistachios, and I might have a banana or something. It's before I go to the gym. And then once I'm done with the gym, I'll typically have a break there of after I work out, I don't eat right away, typically just because of logistics. Like I've got to take my youngest son goes to jiu-jitsu 3 or 4 nights a week and then wrestling. So I'll typically eat dinner around 7 o'clock, and dinner is where I could be a little bit more diligent. I typically just eat whatever my wife's cooking for the family, and she's good. She's a good cook. She cooks a lot of good stuff. But like sometimes if she's feeling like pressed for time, it's like the kids are having nuggets and mac and cheese. I'm like, all right, I'll just make my own. One of the things that I love to have is this is like a good go-to meal. You know those rice packets you can cook in like 90 seconds in the microwave? You rip them open. There's one that's like brown rice and quinoa, and I'll put that in the microwave. I'll fry up 3 eggs, and then I'll put the eggs on top of the cooked rice. It only takes 90 seconds. And then I'll put on like some avocado, some salsa, and sriracha, and you're good to go. There's like a good healthy meal. Sometimes I'll just eat the rice and black beans, and I'll put like a little barbecue sauce in there.
Yeah, it's delicious.
When I'm feeling like motivated and focused, I'll eat a lot of that kind of stuff. I don't like the fact that the rice is processed, but it's as close as I'm gonna get to being perfect with the diet. And then you know, if I'm still hungry after dinner, this is where I get weak, and I'm like, hey, is there any chocolate in the house? Is there any treats?
Dark chocolate has many good benefits. So,
yes.
Like, that is fair.
I love dark chocolate. Yeah, and that's it. That's like the typical, that's a very typical day. But, you know, we'll have a day like yesterday was my wife's birthday, and she's like, I don't want to make dinner. I go, you want me to just order the kids pizza? Which means inevitably, as soon as the pizza comes, I'm like, I'm just going to have a bite or 2. 3 slices later, I'm like, damn you! No discipline. But it was good.
I think you're good.
Oh, so good.
All right, so for over 50 athletes, what advice would you give on balancing intensity with recovery and longevity? And how has this balance shifted for you over the years?
Before I answer, I should like caveat this with I don't suggest anyone takes my advice because when I tell people, you know, this is what I do, they interpret it as like that's what they're going to do, and what's right for me might not be right for you, and vice versa. Like I'm not trying to be funny, but like if you look at what I do and you're like, I'm going to start running 10 miles a day. Well, if you don't have that kind of resiliency in your legs and you don't have that kind of experience, you probably going to get hurt. Yeah. Like you're really going to get an overuse injury. Yeah. There's a lot of things, and I've had them all. The difference is when I'm dealing with myself, I trust myself to fix this stuff. I've trained through every injury under the sun. I would never tell someone else to do that, but this is my body. I do what I want. So I would start there, and the next thing I would say with regards to intensity versus recovery is like, trust that your body can handle a lot more than you think it can. I mean, think about what they do in the military. Think about like Hell Week for the SEALs, and then you think about like, oh, should I run 2 days in a row? Like, there's people that are running like, you know, anything you can think to do, there's someone doing a lot more. And I just think that in general, your body is much more resilient than we give it credit for. But recovery is a real thing. So again, it's like running shoes. People ask me what running shoes I use. I'm like, I know nothing about you. Or like, what kind of tires should you put on your car? I don't know. But one thing I would suggest is why don't you try a few of them and see which ones work. And that's exactly what I would say for balancing the intensity versus recovery. Is like, it's all trial and error. Like we were talking about earlier for the blood biomarkers and the lipid lowering. Like I've got to start trying different things, measuring them, like it matters, because it does. And it's the same thing for people's workouts or shoes or anything else for that matter. We're all very, very different. We're all the same, but we're also very different.
Do the experiment.
Exactly. Treat this stuff with seriousness, the seriousness that it deserves, and experiment with different balances in intensity versus recovery. But again, don't take my advice. My belief for myself is there has to be a lot of intensity. And obviously you can't be intense every day. Like when I say a lot of intensity, when I'm in training for a marathon, I'm doing 2, maybe 3 intense days. But those intense days are intense. Like if someone said, hey, I want to come and run with you, I'm like, cool. But if I'm doing a workout, I'm like, you can come run with me, but this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to run, a mile at, 5:10 pace, and then I'm going to recover for 2 minutes. Then I'm going to do another. I'm going to do that 10 times. I'm going to get 10 by 1 mile at like low 5-minute miles. If you want some of that, then let's go. But if not, I'm not compromising my run so that you can jog with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. Totally fair. And all right, let's do some rapid fire questions. What advice would you give your younger self?
Get serious. Decide what's important to you and focus on it, and stop fiddle fucking around with other nonsense. Take your health and wellness seriously and don't waste time. What don't waste time doesn't mean don't have fun. Spend more time doing the things that are fun, but spend less time mucking around in the noise. Stop with the shenanigans and time robbing. There's a lot of time robbers in the world. They're not doing anything themselves, so all they want to do is rob you of your time to make themselves feel better. Decide what it is that you want to work on, what you want to be the best at, and get to work. Because once you've established that you're the best or you're really good at one thing, people will want to hear your opinions on that, and it will help you in all areas of your life.
That's great. Actually, speaking of time robbers, what's the time robber for you that could come up and grab you?
Social media. I can get lost scrolling on TikTok like an idiot. And then the problem is, and this is from a lot of the mental health work I've done, is I tend to live a lot of my life in a shame storm. I'll do something that is a guilty pleasure, like scrolling TikTok, and then I'll beat the shit out of myself and talk to myself in ways that I would never talk to you, and I would never tolerate someone talking to me. Yeah. Self-talk is important, so I'll be like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're wasting so much time, you idiot. As opposed to I understand why you're enjoying that, but let me tell you, you can be much more productive if you put that down and go do something without looking at a screen. I would say that's the one thing that I would change in my life, is I spend too much time looking at my phone. It's embarrassing. But again, there we go to the shame storm.
Fully relate. I fully relate.
But I will say, I love scrolling TikTok.
TikTok's amazing.
More than any other one, and I don't.
It's because their algorithm is so good, but it's so bad. It's insidious.
And it's weird. Sometimes it serves me up different things. I love TikTok dances, but recently it started serving me up watches on TikTok. So it shows guys trading all kinds of high-end watches, and I just get lost. And I love watches, and I just get lost in oh damn, oh that's what that costs. Oh snap, so.
It finds the internet rabbit holes for you. It is, I don't know, honestly, I finally got on it during COVID, and I think it was a Saturday morning, and I did not come out of that hole until Sunday afternoon. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie Idiocracy.
No.
Oh, it's so good. But anyway, I was like, this is the gilded path to Idiocracy. Where it's anyway. Sorry, that's not my rapid fire questions. Favorite place to run in Boston?
Along the Charles River.
Fair. How many times have you puked during a race?
During the race? I don't think ever, but recently at the end of New York and Berlin, I threw up right after the race. Oh my God, I was in such a deficit. But that's very rare. I don't tend to throw up very often unless I'm really sick. All
right. Pretty good. If Marky Mark and Matt Damon had a baby, who would it look like?
Me?
Yeah! All right! That was a trick question. You got it right. Totally. Is there any health information or fads out there that you think are just a complete myth?
I'll be honest, I'm completely out of the loop. I don't know if, like, I tend to, like, subconsciously or subliminally, like, weed out the shit that doesn't seem to, like, make sense. I try not to get too caught up in, like, this diet fad or this training fad, because I know what works.
Yeah.
Real food and hard work.
Yeah, very fair. What's your donkey's order?
I would just get a large regular coffee.
Delicious, by the way. Sometimes extra is always nice. If my brother gets me one, I'll do extra. All right, what's your secret to showing up for yourself every day, no matter what the circumstances?
Well, it's not really a secret. It's just about extreme accountability. Again, I have a unique background in that I suffered with addiction and made it out of there. And there are times where I will literally say to my wife, I'm like, can you fucking believe I've done this? Can you believe I got sober and created this life for us, for myself? There are moments where I'm getting choked up thinking about it. Like, I'm proud of myself. Like, compared to where I was, I mean, at one point in my mind, suicide was like a legitimate, viable option to get out of the hell that I was in. And I don't say that lightly, like, oh, I thought about suicide. Like, in my mind, that was one of the potential outcomes of what was going to happen if I couldn't fix this. And I did it. And I'm here. And I'm happy as a motherfucker.
Awesome. Ken, this has been amazing. Cannot thank you enough for the time that you have spent with us, the candidness. This was a super fun interview, so I really appreciate that. Thanks for making it super easy on us as well. And we'd love to hear from you on where people can find you if they want to follow you and see what you're up to.
Yes, the main place to find me is on Instagram. Just search Ken Rideout. I'm pretty sure like I'm the only Ken Rideout out there that I know of. The one place you should not find me is on LinkedIn. Please don't send me a LinkedIn request, man. If I don't know you in a professional setting, I do not want to connect. I do not want to grow my professional network. It's where it has to be. But if I meet you in the real world in a natural setting, I promise you we'll connect on LinkedIn. But do not cold call me on LinkedIn. It's a pet peeve.
All right. That sounds great.
Oh, and you can also find me on Strava too. Ken Rideout.
Oh, yeah.
Strava.
Yes. No.
I'm a Strava power user.
I noticed because I found you on Strava. You're amazing. All right. Thank you so much again.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.